Hello, everybody. Today, we continue about the sustainability. So we will cover more topics about sustainability. Today's instructional objectives are as follows. I will explain the history of modern environmental movement. I will explain how the EPA, it stands for Environmental Protection Agency, created as a governmental agency in US, and need of different thinking to solve the environmental problems arise in different parts of the world. And I will also explain a kind of concept which is called tragedy of the commons. So there are 4 elements in today's lecture. Let's start with the modern environmental movement, how it is started. Rachel Louise Carson, born in May 27, 1907, and died in April 14, 1964. She was an American marine biologist, author, and at the same time conservationist, and her book name is Silent Spring, and other writings are credited with the advancing the global environmental movement. So this is a kind of really milestone in the modern environmental movement. The author is Rachel Louise Carson, and the book that she wrote, Silent Spring, was important step to make the environmental movement carry on. Silent Spring was a commercial success soon after its publication. Actually, what was the topic? What was the content of this silent book? Actually, it visually captured the fact that songbirds were facing reproductive failure and early death because of manufacturing and prolific use of the chemicals, such as DDT. DDT was a kind of the chemicals used for the control of household pests. And it was recognized that use of these chemicals was affecting the songbirds. Historians, it was initial catalyst for creation of the modern environmental movement in the United States, along with the US Environmental Protection Agency. In Silent Spring book, Carson asked hard question about whether and why humans had right to control the nature and who has the right to decide who is living or dying, to poison or to destroy the non-human life. As a human being, do we have this right? She was questioning in her book. In showing that all biological systems were dynamic, and by urging the public to question authority to ask who speaks and why. And Rachel Carson became a social revolutionary, and the Silent Spring became the handbook for the future of all life on the earth. Some of the human impacts on the environment, and few things happened that helped the modern environmental movement. Some bad accidents or damage on the environment. So I will give you some examples, and which are only selected ones. You can search yourself and see what happened in the past. 1948, 20 people killed and thousands injured in Donora, Pennsylvania, due to release of smoke from an industry. And you can see, because of pollution, people were wearing masks. Cuyahoga River in Ohio catching fire in 1969. Spark from a train fell into toxic industrial waste in the river, and the fire was the catalyst for the change. Love Channel in New York. Storage of toxic chemicals converted into residential area. So there was a public health emergency and urban planning scandal because you cannot use a kind of, toxic chemicals storage area as a residential area. It will implement lots of harmful effects on the human life. Let me speak about the creation of EPA. You all need to know about the Environmental Protection Agency, and you can search quickly from internet and read about more what the EPA is doing, what are the main missions, and get some ideas how it helps to protect the environment in US. EPA was created in 1972 via environmental social movement. And you can see the logo of EPA here, which is covering the blue and green. Usually these colors are used to show green environment, blue sky, like protected environment. So it's a kind of nice logo, gives a good feeling to the people. It includes the federal research, monitoring, standard setting, and enforcement activities with the mission of protecting human health and environment. So actually, what is the main mission of EPA? The main idea is to protect the human health and environment. Creation of EPA. The Congress passed many of the fundamental and critical environmental regulations, such as National Environmental Protection Act, it is called NEPA, Clean Air Act, the Water Pollution Control Act, the Wilderness Protection Act, and the Endangered Species Act. These are again some selected regulations, environmental regulations. The most significant tool is the writing regulations as a tools of Environmental Protection Agency. The regulatory process begins with the Congress passing a law, then authorizing the EPA to help putting that law into effect by creating and enforcing regulations. The EPA strategic plan. The EPA strategic plan identifies 5 strategic goals to guide the agency's work. Please give attention to these 5 strategic goals. Goal 1, taking action on climate change and improving the air quality. Goal 2, protecting Americans' waters. Goal 3, cleaning up communities and advancing sustainable development. Goal 4, ensuring the safety of chemicals and preventing pollution. Goal 5, enforcing environmental laws. So by taking care of these 5 strategic goals, EPA plans to protect human health and environmental resources. How we can think differently. Different thinking is an important. I put a photo here from Albert Einstein and one of his saying. What Albert Einstein was telling to us. He said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So really we need to find a way of different thinking to find out the solutions. And this phrase can be practiced in our life, even for the problems and issues we faced in our personal life. Think differently and focus on the solutions. Here, I would like to show how the population was changing by time from 19th century and up to date with some prediction up to 2050. And you can see in the first 118 years since beginning of the 19th century, the population has been increased from 1 billion to the 2 billion. So it was a slow increase. Then the increase in the population have been accelerated a bit, and recent trend is a kind of almost exponential growth, very high increase. You can see from this graph that population increase become very fast in recent years. In fact, 80 million people are added each year, and that means resource consumption per capita is on rise. If the population growth and consumptions are doubled, this will result in ecological impossibility. I want to give a think, what does it mean ecological impossibility? And maybe we will discuss it in the group later. And numerous challenges for engineers should be searched to protect and enhance the environment. So there are lots of roles and responsibilities are given to engineers to protect and enhance the environment. And chemical engineers can be part of this protection. What are the sustainable solutions that engineers will be engaged? So some of the issues I summarized here: globalization, trade and development, climate change. This is really an urgent issue. Internationally, focus is given. Growth of megacities. Engineers will be again part of this issue. Fresh water depletion. Water scarcity and water depletion have been partly discussed in the previous lecture, and how the engineers can come over these problems is an important issue. Marine and coastal degradation, population growth, rising consumption behavior. It is not only the growth of population, there is a trend of per capita consumption, and this is also adding extra use of water, excess generation of the waste. So lifestyle and our habits are also important. So possibly educational changes are necessary too. And one of the maybe other topic is the biodiversity. And these are some of the important issues we need to find a sustainable solution as an engineers. The last topic of today's presentation is the tragedy of the commons. I want you to remember this as a phrase, tragedy of the commons. What does it mean? It is a situation in a shared resource system where individual users act independently according to their own self-interest behave contrary to the common good for all users, and this will cause the deplete or spoil of the resource through the collective actions. So this theory is developed by British economist and name is William Lloyd. I would like to give an example to the tragedy of commons, which is overfishing. Look at the time in the x-axis and the y-axis is showing the fish landings in tons. And you can see between the years 1950 up to 1965, there was a overfishing. The fish landings as a ton was substantially increased. You can see it was increased from 1950, it was around 300,000 tons, then it reached as a peak value 800,000 tons. And what you can see as a return, fish stocks started to be depleted and you cannot catch anymore that amount of fish because your resource as a fish stocks have been depleted, cannot keep the same numbers in the ecosystem as before. So this is a kind of tragedy of commons. If you use the resources, you exploit them, actually human being will be suffering as a result. So we should be using our resources in a sustainable way. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. I want all of you to think what can be the other tragedy of the commons. I give one example, overfishing. Think about some other events and we will discuss it later. Bye for now.